This is Business Untitled, post-election episode. We've given it a few weeks to digest, see what's happening.
Let's go. Everybody's wondering where the 10 years going to go and whether to dive into real estate right now or not.
Tariffs is like the most popular word in the world now next to Bitcoin.
We have a crisis in America, $36 trillion of debt, 7% budget deficit, unsustainable. It will bankrupt our children if we don't deal with it. I'm introducing us because he was like, he's got a piece of paper on his lap. We're back from the Middle East, Mel Carter. This is Business Untitled, post-election episode. We've given it a few weeks to digest, see what's happening. We've got markets, we've got Mideast, we've got music. 3 M's.
I like that.
Here we go.
Mel, how was where were you? Abu Dhabi?
Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi, went to Dubai for a night with Steven. Shout out to Steven. Khalifa hosted us. It was a really, really good, interesting trip. It's my friend's birthday, and we went out there, stayed, I think we were there for like 6 days.
It's a long trip.
It's a long trip, but it was very, very cool.
Give us 2 things you learned, because we saw you in your thobe.
Yeah.
And your white.
That's kind of cool.
Black guy can get away with that a lot better than a white guy.
Yeah, probably. Have you ever worn one out there?
No. I've worn one in my house. I was going to go outside and my kids almost attacked me. They're like, Dad, you can't go outside.
I learned that the royal family is a real thing. It's not just like, I think it's completely different from what the Queen of England and that royal family is. Just, I think they're more so like a really cool image they have. But the royal family in Abu Dhabi is not just an image, but they're powerful. They control the government. It kind of runs down the bloodline, and I think they have to like appoint who is like the next crown royal prince and the president. But it's very different. The Queen of England is just like the Queen of England, right?
Figurehead.
A figurehead. Does she have power? I don't think she has any power, right?
It's a king now.
The Queen passed away.
Yeah.
Well,
You got to start reading the news.
I know she passed away, but I'm just saying, when she was alive, did she have like?
It's moral authority more than
Moral authority,
actual
exactly right.
power.
What is moral authority?
People listen to her because of the title and the history, and she serves as this place where she's like, in a theory, like the better self of the British people. So she's like a moral compass for them, even though she has no actual legislative or executive duties.
Right. Most Western countries decided having royal rulers wasn't great for the rest of the people. It was great for the king. It wasn't great for everyone else. And so, in Russia, they chopped the heads off the czars, and and broadly, most kings have been overruled or thrown out of power. In the Mideast and in other, mostly just the Mideast left. I guess Thailand has a king still, but Thailand's got a king, but it's also got a prime minister. Bhutan's got a king.
So Abu Dhabi has a king. They have a president that is, I guess, the king, right? How does that, from your knowledge, how does that work?
Abu Dhabi Inc. is run by the royal family. They are bright. They are forward-looking. There are 3 brothers, a lot of sons, cousins, and their fingerprints are on everything in those emirates. They get credit for being visionary, for bringing NYU Hospital in, for, they're forward-thinking. They were lucky that they had a tremendous amount of oil and natural gas, and so they had this bubbling pool of resource. But it's one of the great success stories in the world over the last 40 years. What will be challenging, both in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi, right, you had Sheikh Mo in Dubai and Sheikh Z in Abu Dhabi, is the next generation and the generation after that. Will they be as visionary and focused? And, because why are all their people so happy? Well, all their people are getting paid well, and they're seeing their quality of life go up all the time, right? Being a leader in a country Your
And there's no
main
tax.
your main job, doesn't matter if you're the president of the United States or Ecuador or Abu Dhabi, your main job is to make the life of your citizens better. Doing that by increasing productivity of your place. And Abu Dhabi's done that in spades. And so like top 10 world leader at this point.
Yeah, well, and they've had a tremendous amount of oil
Yeah,
wealth, right, in that context, right? So that makes it, I don't say easier, but obviously there's a lot more money to go around.
But there's
I
some
was-
countries
But look
who
at
had
Brunei.
like
Look
I
at
was just
Brunei.
about to say that.
And, I
Yeah.
was at
Yeah,
Brunei.
that's fair.
That place, the Sultan of Brunei seems to care a lot about the Sultan of Brunei and his brother Jeffrey.
Yeah. Fair point. I'm also contrasting with Dubai that has no oil money at all,
Yeah.
right, effectively, but it's another one of the Emirates and really had to use like ingenuity, right, ports, airplanes, tourism, banking, right, effectively to like drive an
In
economy.
some way, Dubai's more impressive.
Yeah, that's what I was
because
saying.
They built that with just moxie.
Yeah.
Being that Abu Dhabi is the leader of the Emirates, did they fund a lot of the stuff in Dubai?
In 08, when Dubai got carried over its skis and had a huge financial crisis, he called the head of Dubai, called his cousin the prince, and he gave him a nice loan. And so there's certainly a very good relationship between those two Emirates. But don't take anything away from Dubai. What they did is staggering. Yeah. Because it's not been mostly
I think
money.
also Dubai,
I think they're the
is-
most visited city in the world now, right? I think I read that somewhere.
Really? More than Paris? I'd be surprised.
Yeah, I think so.
But I think Dubai also served as a role model, in a sense, for a lot of the other Middle East,
Yeah.
even oil powerhouses, right? In terms of like reforming. If you look at Saudi and what they're trying to do now, Qatar, what they're trying to do now, you got to think Dubai's in their vision, right? Of what they were able
Abu
to
Dhabi,
create.
Dubai, that combo, yes.
Yeah, that combo was in their vision in a sense, and it really shaped the way a lot of these Mideast countries are forming their
And
policy.
quite frankly, when you can pivot that right to, the tragedy that's going on in Gaza and Palestine, and those countries, Saudi, Qatar, all the Gulf states, they're looking over there and they're like, we don't want to deal with that crap. We want to build a nice place where our people go to school, our kids get educated, our wives buy Chanel handbags, lots of them, watches. Like, they want a good life. And they're like, we don't want that life. And so even on a geopolitical side, in the past, there had been like the streets would rise when one of the Arab people were getting, in a skirmish with Israel. And now they're like, just take care of it.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're going to see real fast, like we said this, I think, a few podcasts ago, the war in between Israel and Gaza is broadly over. They're going to declare a truce, and you're going to see Israel make a peace deal with Saudi, Abu Dhabi, that whole part of the world, because they're like, hey, we want some of that Iron Dome. It worked pretty well. Like we want technology, we want trade. They're moving beyond, I think, what we used to.
And what happens to Palestine?
I think it's just going to be a sad, sad story. I think they'll be figuring out, some group of countries will put some money there. It'll probably be like a DMZ, a demilitarized zone between Palestine and Israel, like a real, kind of like you see in North Korea. And they're going to have a crappy existence for a long time.
Let's talk about some
Wait,
trends.
I got one more question on that, right? Because I do see, like, I've been to Saudi, and I do see, and I do feel like it's because Dubai had such a success story, like bringing tourism. Everybody's kind of like, it's legal to drink in, like, hotels and certain restaurants and stuff like that, at least for visitors, right? Do you think, from your point of view and knowing the world, do you think that there is like a success story for tourism, for Saudi, for as strong as Dubai, or people are just like, this is the first one I want to like?
No, I think bigger. I think tourism in Saudi Arabia will dwarf Dubai in time, partly because it's bigger. It's got spectacular natural resources, right? Dave and I were at the opening of the Habitats in Alula. And Alula is one of the cooler places on earth. Like, if you're going to do your 20 places you want to see in the world, like, it's their version of the Grand Canyon, but and they've already built beautiful hotels and a beautiful opera house that's all made of mirrors. And so Neom is going to be, when it's done, like one of the wonders of the world, if it gets done.
They cut it though, right?
Yeah, but they cut it from some bizarre number to still a very, very large number they're going to spend, and they're going to build it.
Yeah.
And so look, what's the risk there to this great story in Saudi Arabia is Donald Trump, who is very well liked in the Mideast, the Abu Dhabi team, the Saudi team, feel very comfortable with him. He wants the price of oil much lower. Right, price of oil is about $70 a barrel right now. Trump wants it at 50, and
Every episode.
and Saudi can't handle a $50 oil. I mean,
What is oil now?
70.
During COVID, it was like 50, right?
It
Like
went
the
down at one
beginning.
point. Yeah.
Um,
And so that's when we talk about the policies of the new administration. One of the stated policies of both Scott Bessent, the new Secretary, and Trump is to get the price of oil down.
Yeah.
Why? Cheaper cost for Americans.
Yeah. Yeah. And in a sense, the Saudi government anticipates at some point in time that their reserves are going to be running out, their oil's going to be lower, right? Basically, that's why they're trying to diversify,
Yes.
right? In a sense. And so whether that comes a little bit quicker, whether that happens or not happens, I think another risk is just it's a centrally planned economy, right? They need to educate all these people. They need to create entrepreneurship and technological innovation, and these things are easier said than done. And so that's going to be the
They need
story.
at least 30 years of oil revenues
right.
to make that transition, at least.
Yeah.
These are hard transitions to make.
Yeah.
They just
Got to
are.
educate all these young,
And-
your young people.
It's happening at a time when the pace of innovation and change is about to go asymptotic with AI.
Mm-hmm.
It just is, happening faster by the week. And so even like if you were sitting down with a kid right now and you're saying, what should you study? You're like, I don't know. It's much less intuitive than it was 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. Hey, study coding. You're going to there's be a demand for a coder. AI is going to do all the coding, right? So you've seen Jensen Huang say, we will never have coders that, you're going to just, right? And so what jobs, accounting is going to go to the AI. I mean, so much. And so that's another, you're trying to change your economy from here, but you're not exactly sure where you're trying to change it to.
So what happens to all the geniuses who created all this really dope stuff by coding? Like is there a new level for those type of guys, or it's just they're done? Or what's the new generation of coders? What does that look like? Just people that's really good at AI?
I think, listen, someone also has to organize human systems, right?
Yes.
So in a sense, it's not magically going to happen, right? It's the technical aspects of being this coder are being replaced by the computer.
You're going to tell the AI agent, hey, I want to do a ride-sharing project where drivers can, have their location seen, and when Mel decides he wants to ride, it pops up, and the closest driver, Uber, right? Uber got coded. Now you're going to speak into what you want. But Travis is still going to have this concept of how it works to tell the machine to code it.
So, in other words, anybody could come up with an idea now and just kind of give it to AI, and it's the first person.
We'll see.
Anybody can have an idea today too, right? It's just, can you execute it?
Yeah, but you needed a big part of that idea for Uber or for Facebook. You needed to figure out how to code it. Now, if you could just tell AI
that's a big
to code
part of
it
it
for you.
But there was a lot of other big parts of that too, right? In terms of his execution, in terms of how many markets should I go into at once? What should I pay? What's the financial model that I'm going to offer drivers? What's the benefit that riders are getting? Is it just the fact that they're able to reserve a car? Is it the fact that you don't have a credit card you have to pull out anymore because it's in the app? Is it the rating system, right? All these things were thought up by Travis or his, co-founders at that point in time. And that's what made Uber Uber. And there's probably 100 other companies you never heard of that tried to do something like what Uber was doing.
So let's pivot back to the election, because it's big, it's real. We're 3 weeks in. Trump has, in completely Donald Trump fashion, has shocked us with some of his picks to the negative side and surprised us in a giant way to the positive side, right? We're going to have probably the best economic team we've had in America in 30 years, maybe since, Bob Rubin and Larry Summers.
Can you talk about that? Why? Talk about why.
Yeah, so you've heard me talk a lot about we have a crisis in America, $36 trillion of debt, 7% budget deficit, unsustainable. It will bankrupt our children. It will end up making America look like Venezuela if we don't deal with it. And no one wanted to deal with it. No one talked about it during the, Biden didn't, Harris didn't, and Trump didn't really. And lo and behold, the first person who started chirping about it was Elon, saying this is crazy. We need to cut government waste. And so first of all, Trump gets Elon and Vivek to do this DOGE, right? Department of Government Efficiency. Last time we did this was 1984 when I worked at Office of Management and Budget. There was a thing called the Grace Commission. W.R. Grace, big industrialist. Ronald Reagan said, can you help me cut the government? And he got a bunch of Wall Streeters, actually, who spent a year looking for changes to the government to save
successful?
money. It was mini successful. And it was harder then, quite frankly, to get those ideas and get them implemented. Right? These are big bureaucracies that don't want to die. And even when they were starting to get implemented, to track them going forward. Matter of fact, my first job, outside of being a gardener and a lifeguard, and my first job was working at the Office of Management and Budget, and they handed me this giant book called the Grace Commission. And they said, Novo, we'd like you to code it. I used Lotus Notes. Lotus Notes was like the very first. It was like an Excel, right? And after about 3 days, I was like, this is insanity. I'm like, I'm a shitty computer science student. I took one class. And then they called CDC, the Controlled Data Corporation, who came over and I gave them a lecture. I gave them the briefing on what needed to get done.
Did you get fired?
What?
Did you get fired?
No, I was almost promoted for, I'm 3 weeks on the job and I'm not making this story up. And I have no idea if it ever got coded into the budget, but it was so complicated because, like, for instance, let's say you're a veterans hospital and we say, okay, we're going to give you a whole new computer system, but then you've got to cut costs the next 3 years. So we give you the $4 million computer system. Well, who's making sure your costs go down? Back then it's all on paper. Now it's going to be coded into, a database. But so we'll see. I pray they're successful, right? They need to cut a lot of fat out of our government. We do a lot of stupid things in our government the way it's set up. But so that's part of it.
Yeah. I think with that, just to take that for a second, I hope they're successful too, right? But I think it's like the low-hanging fruit. It's the easy route to be like, let's just cut costs. Let's be more efficient, right? But it's so much easier said than done with these systems, right? You have these people that are in different government departments for years, decades even sometimes. And so you're really in this office for 4 years if you're the Trump administration, right? And to try to make these changes where you have bureaucrats and people in these positions that have been there for decades, they can last you out. So I'm not being completely pessimistic on it, but I think it's a really easy.
But it'd be there was a couple of things that were interesting. I didn't realize that a ton of government workers were working from home. And post-COVID, like the SEC works from home.
Yeah.
And you saw Elon was like, that's bullshit. And Trump's already said on day one, I'm going to say no working from home. That will be a natural attrition. Some people will say I'm quitting. And it'll be that message that there's a new sheriff in town. I'm not saying it's great or bad. We still have, plenty of employees that spend at least 1 or 2 days a week from home. It drives me a little crazy. But, generational shift and the kind of company we are.
Yeah.
The banks all came back to work.
Yeah. All right. So we got a Treasury secretary.
Well, let me talk about him for a second.
Yeah,
so Scott Bessent.
Who's the two guys?
Scott Bessent is the Treasury secretary. And for 30 years, he broadly had the exact same job I did. He was a macroeconomic investor, which means he understands.
Was he good?
He's very good. He's very good. Put him in that top 10 bucket. Worked for Stan Druckenmiller, who's probably number one. And so best mentor, worked for George Soros, who was right up there. And it's important because knowing the plumbing of how we're going to fund a $36 trillion debt, how treasuries work, how inflation works, is wildly more important today than it would say 14 years ago, the Treasury Secretary was Jack Lew, who was more of a technocrat, did a fine job. No one even knew who he was, right? There's secretaries that just do their jobs, and there's secretaries that are really part of the decision process. My guess, because the kind of guy Scott is, he will be around that table, and the economy is going to be the driving issue. And so what will be interesting is he will talk rational privately. What he says publicly, he's going to represent the president. But privately, he will be pushing back on Trump's crazy ideas all the time. If they're crazy ideas, there'll be a real foil of, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. The problem is, to really make a difference in our deficit, you've got to cut Social Security and Medicare. And Congress doesn't want to do that. The president doesn't want to do that. But you have to. And we'll see if he can do that. Remember, Congress controls the purse strings of our country, not the president. But listen, you feel much better as an American having Scott Bessent and the team around him in place.
Yeah, and if you look at, just in terms of cutting Social Security or cutting those third rails, so to speak, Macron in France pushed the retirement age 2 years over 10 or 15, right? It wasn't all of a sudden. It was every year it was pushed by a month for some period of time, right? Until it was going to be. There were riots, people protesting. They wanted to throw him out of office. Very unpopular. And so you could expect something like that will happen.
But did
here.
it ultimately end up helping the economy?
It was good for France, but it was bad for Macron.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Right. And so politicians don't like to do unpopular things.
But did France end up seeing that it was good for them?
Well, we'll know in 10 years.
Yeah. I think the argument would be that it was good for them if they needed to do it. And he kind of fell on the sword because, he really believed in it. And, I give him a lot of props for that, to be honest with you, because he knew it was going to be very unpopular and it caused a big mess.
So when Jerome Powell retires in 18 months, Kevin Warsh shows up. Kevin Warsh will be a spectacularly, transparent and good chairman of the Fed. And so, these are real guys.
Let me ask you this. Do you think, right, when we were in this room months ago and we were talking about the deficit and how much it was growing and the amount of debt that was out there, I think there was a reigning opinion among a lot of the big players on Wall Street, certainly echoed by you and throughout this podcast. Do you think that narrative has changed now that Trump has made some of these selections, and has that been reflected in the markets?
Well, it started to be. So gold prices have come off the last couple of days. Ever since Bessent got elected, right? If you think about the story for gold, and quite frankly for Bitcoin, right? It's irresponsible government, printing too much money, debasing the dollar, therefore hard assets go up. At least for a short pause, we're like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, shit. We got a guy that actually might do the right thing, right? Debt to GDP, instead of going from 110 to 150, maybe heads back. And if that's the case, the story for gold, silver, and even Bitcoin to a degree is not nearly as strong. Now, why hasn't it collapsed? It's easy to say what you're going to do. It's hard to do it. This is a brutally complicated task that both Elon and Vivek and Scott Bessent with the budget are going to try to approach, right? You got Congress. You've got President Trump has never in his whole entire career not liked to borrow more and spend more. Right? And it's his last 4 years. We need a better military. No, we need to cut costs in the military. We need to spend the same amount or less and get more. That's productivity increase. We'll see if it can happen. As Dave said, it is really hard to beat up bureaucracies. They're good at holding on. Yeah. And so, we'll see what the economy does. If he's going to do tariffs, I think Trump is going to beat his chest and yell big tariffs and use that as a negotiating tactic to get us better trade deals. More power to him if he does. But jamming big tariffs will slow the economy.
I want to know more about tariffs, because tariffs is the most popular word in the world now next to Bitcoin. Can you just break down tariffs?
They've been around for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. So let's start there, right? They were around in ancient Greece. They were around when we separated from Britain, right? So it's been a thing, right? They periodically get more popular, less popular. They're effectively taxes on imports or exports of goods, right? So it's like goods crossing borders and you're levying a tax on it. And right now he's made it clear that he wants to raise these tariffs. Why, right? What's the purpose behind it? Well, one purpose is you protect domestic manufacturing, because if your premise is that the Chinese are overproducing goods, which is what the basic premise is, and they're dumping those goods on Europe and the United States, then we get cheaper TVs and cheaper cars as consumers. But if you're a TV company, a car company, an agricultural company, what have you, in the United States, you're not competing as well, because these artificially subsidized, effectively, Chinese goods are being dumped onto the market. And so tariffs like equal the scales, right? They put 10%, 20% more on that. So it's inflationary. That's what you'll hear about it, because the consumer's gonna pay 20% more for that TV in my example, but it makes American businesses more competitive, which creates jobs, and there's voters in those jobs and employment. So it's a really kind of complicated equation.
Yeah, but I don't want to pay
way.
20% more for anything, right?
Think of this. Walmart, right, imports a huge amount of the stuff you buy at Walmart. America shops at Walmart. Yeah. A lot of that is made in China. And now Walmart is going to have to pay 25% more to get the same stuff. They're just going to pass that directly through to the consumer.
So you're right. In that context, you would pay more for a TV or whatever it was. But you're not thinking in that context of the back end, which is like employment in Indiana, West Virginia, Ohio.
So will there be more
right?
or less money to go around? Right.
Less.
Well,
and if it's less money,
it's a little bit more complicated than that, though, because also the Chinese are overproducing for a very particular reason. They're trying to.
I'm not sure I agree with you on that. So, like, what we did, if you believe in free trade, right, which the whole world did for a while, was produce what you can at the best place. So there's one town in China that makes all the microwaves. So they had economies of scale; they could make it. So for Dave and I to start a microwave business, our microwaves are going to cost, 100% more than their microwaves. Yeah. So why would anyone buy from us? And so we would buy from them, and they would buy stuff from us. One of the things Trump said was unfair is like, well, we're letting their stuff come in with no tariffs, but for us to sell our hamburgers, our cows they're putting tariffs on it. And so like, at least there should be equal. Right. And there wasn't. So that's what I think he's going to use this as a hammer to negotiate better trade deals. Yeah. The other part is exactly what Dave said. Without noticing it, we outsourced lots of our manufacturing. Yeah. What's complicated, no one talks about, that's for us to rebuild U.S. supply chains outside of China. It's like a $20 trillion project. We can't.
Yeah, but I would say it doesn't mean we just give up on the remaining supply chains we have here, right? So like agriculture might be one, around automotive employees. I think it's something like 10% of something like private sector employees are related to the automotive industry. It's a big number. It's a big number. Someone can Google it, but it's between 5 and 10%. So these are big industries, right? So you can't just. True, we've outsourced a lot of it to China over the last 30 years, and it's been a problem for the United States, right, in terms of...
I'm not disagreeing with you. How you get that back into equilibrium is unbelievably complicated.
Yes, it is. And why is it a problem, and how has it been a problem? Well, what we're seeing politically is the repercussions partly of this outsourcing of all the jobs to China, right? And so like if you're in financial assets or certain places, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, basically, because our one of the reasons is our manufacturing base has left. I would also bring up, and you can react to this, but that China keeps the value of their currency artificially low versus the dollar by buying dollars, selling their currency, right? And that makes them more competitive. So when you look at tariffs, you need to look at currencies too. Very complicated, right? But it's but if you have a world which we have where China was pushing their currency to be devalued and encouraging their factories to produce more and more and more to try to get them right now out of this deflation that they've been in, then we're going to be at the other end of that, where our industries are not going to be able to compete with these effectively government subsidized industries and efficient industries out of China, right? So it's both those things happening at once, and it's a problem for the U.S. So Trump's kind of recognizing that, to Mike's point, whether it's more of a negotiating tactic or those tariffs are going to go in like that, maybe is beside the point at the end of the day, because if it has the intended effect of, reducing the tariffs in China, right, on our inbound, or maybe having the currency increase a little bit relative to the dollar. There's a lot of ways to solve this.
The TLDR, tariffs will slow the economy, period. They will slow growth. They will slow the economy. They're not good for growth.
So with us being at this bad at a point already, right? Like, do we need to slow growth?
Let's.
We've been in inflation, though.
We have inflation from COVID. The whole world had inflation. It's come down, and it's
maybe
sitting around 2.25%, 2.5%. So inflation's okay. We've created a tremendous amount of jobs, right? Tremendous amount of jobs. Biden created more jobs in 4 years than any president in the last 40, right? Like, terrible salesman about it, but just huge job boom. The economy's still growing pretty strong. One of the reasons interest rates sold off, between September and November, was that everyone thought the economy was going to slow, and it still hasn't slowed. People have been talking about the economy slowing down for over 2 years, and it just is the little engine that could. It just keeps chugging along. Partly that's government spending. Partly that's the economy's pretty healthy, right? There's a lot of money, and it's really healthy in places like high end, and it's really not that healthy in the low end.
Yeah.
So like low end consumers are really having a hard time. It's one of the reasons you saw that in the election. Those are hard things to fix. They just are. So because when you're a policymaker, you have to make it for the aggregate economy, right? When you're talking about inflation and growth, it's really hard to say, I need the economy to grow faster for those people, but slower for those people. And that's where we're at right now.
I remember this mattress company, you were like right idea, wrong time, because in a couple months, this was summertime, it was like within a year, people would be buying homes every 5 minutes because the interest rates are going to go down. And I think the interest rates went down for a little bit, but now went back up.
Well, they've cut them 75 basis points.
Depends which interest rates you're talking about. Yeah.
Like multifamily
houses. There's the short term and the long-term rates, right? So,
which one matters to you as a developer or buying real estate?
The long-term, like the 10-year rate matters much more for mortgages and real estate valuations.
So, where's that at now, and where would that be in a year?
That's a great question. We could make a lot of money if we knew the answer.
That's true.
Well, right now, is it because this was summertime we were talking about this? So right now, and you kind of said it would be down by now, or is it down?
So sure. A lot of the narrative we would talk about was around the short-term Fed funds rate, which is like controlled by the Fed, and that's what's come down 75 basis points, right? 2 cuts over the last.
It'll come down another 25 in the next 1 or 2 meetings.
Yeah.
So they'll have dropped the Fed funds rate 100 basis points.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean 10-year rates have to fall. 10-year rates went all the way down to like 360.
350 even.
350 back to 410. They're right around there now.
I think they're even higher than that.
And so my guess is for the next couple of years, we're going to be 450, 350, 450.
You're talking about the 10-year.
10-year. Yeah. I just think.
Let me just slow down for 1 second so I can explain. The short term and the long term are completely different, right? Interest rates in theory are all related, but the short term interest rate, like let's take the overnight rate that banks borrow from each other, right, is more, it's what everybody talked about for the last 2 years when they were like, the Fed's going to cut, right? That's very specific to this short-term rate. And the long-term rates were actually lower for a long time, which is this inverted yield curve. We talked about it a little bit, but it's an unusual situation. Most of the time, long rates are higher than short rates because there's more risk in time, right? And so if you're going to lock your money up for 30 days versus 10 years, you're going to generally over history require more interest on the 10-year lock because a lot more things can go wrong, right? 30 days, you're liquid in 30 days, and it's a much safer asset, more less volatile asset. What's happened since the Fed started cutting rates, what Mike was talking about before, right? And they've done 2 rate cuts in September, and is that the 10-year has actually gone up from 3.5 or whatever it was then, 3.6 to like 4.2, 4.3, 4.4. Mortgage rates trend off spread off the 10-year. And so since the fall, since September, mortgage rates, which had come down, right? We're talking over the last year, to say 6%, 5.75%, 6%, have now trended back up to say 6.5%, 6.75%. And that makes borrowing more expensive in real estate.
Slows real estate down.
It slows real estate down. It affects valuations in real estate too. So I think that from 3 months ago till now, there's like a palpable difference where investors in income-producing real estate are like pausing for a second as they see these rates come up, where valuations are, and what the real question is like, where is the 10-year going to be 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 1 year from now? And I'll let you talk in 1 second, but that was a place where when we had this conversation 3 months ago, 4 months ago, and we would talk about the macro guys talking about rates, the prevailing trade was 10 years going to go up. There's too much inflation. There's too much debt. And rates are not going to come down because the government's spending too much money. And indeed, rates did go up right on the 10-year, I'm saying, from 3.5, 3.6 to, and the question is, are they going to keep going up? Because at that point in time, Mike and we had talked about this and thought, they're going to go to 4.5 to 5% 10-year. If you believe that they're going 4.5 to 5% 10-year, real estate's not going to do it's not going to do well. It's going to have to reset to that new normal. Or you could believe that they're going down to 4%, 3.5% again, which is a really bullish sign for real estate because all your borrowing costs go down, your valuations go up. And so I kind of feel like right this second, we're at this like inflection point where everybody's wondering where the 10 years going to go and whether to dive into real estate right now or not.
So there are 2 things that are happening, right? There's the economy is stronger than everyone thought it was.
Yeah.
Right? Why did everyone think rates were going much lower originally? Right? People were talking the Fed would have to cut 300 basis points because you started thinking jobs were going to slow down, new jobs were going to slow down, the economy was weakening, and then it just picked right back up again.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to pause you there, right? Which is this, right? This is a really interesting point. This is what's really fucked about understanding this. When the economy slows down and unemployment increases and rates go down, like it's a good sign for investment, right? It's like counterintuitive because you'd think the economy slowing down and people getting laid off, it's like, oh man, I got to take my money out of the stock market and out of real estate. It's the reverse. It's like what the market was saying was, oh, this is good. The economy's going to slow down. People are going to start being unemployed. Fed's going to cut rates. All the rates are going to come down. That's going to mean real estate and stock prices are going to go up. Indeed, that's not what happened, right? The economy's been stronger than anticipated. Job growth has been stronger than anticipated. And so now it's almost like the reverse is happening.
Well, and the question is, can the Fed keep cutting rates? Now,
But here's the thing. Who benefits from that, right? Because in a weird way, jobs being lost equals to investors investing more, people buying more homes, so on and so forth. But if people lose jobs, the average person can't buy a new home. So who benefits?
So there's this
the
balance.
Rich,
No, there's this balance that you try to, right? So the Federal Reserve has a dual mandate.
Yeah.
To keep inflation checked at 2% and to create jobs. That's its dual mandate, right? Employment and jobs. And so if you have
employment and inflation.
If you have the economy running too hot, it creates inflation. Inflation erodes everybody's purchasing power, right? And so we saw what happened.
That's what you saw over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
We had the COVID inflation and everybody felt less rich, right? Rice, eggs, gas, shoes, houses all got very expensive. You're like, shit, I'm making the same amount of money. I can't afford anything, right? So their primary job first is like keep inflation down, but also and so there's this equilibrium they're trying to hit, right? You want to have as many new jobs with inflation at 2 to 3%, right? And that's nirvana.
And
we call it Goldilocks.
And you might ask why, like you might be like, why 2 or 3%? It's a good question, right? It's just like the structural paradigm that exists. There's no reason for it. It could be 1%, it could be 5%.
100%.
It's just the way the world is set up, it like expects 2 or 3% inflation. That's the level at which consumers will be like, oh, like stuff's getting expensive every year, but it's not breaking my pocketbook, right?
Yeah.
You expect to get a raise of a few percent every year. You expect that the cost of a hotel room or a car, is going to go up a couple of percent. You don't expect that, 3 months later, you're going to go into a restaurant and the steak that was $20 is now $35, right? Or that the hotel room that you were, right, is like $300 instead of $200. And that's what we saw over the last couple of years. That's what freaked everybody out about inflation, understandably, right? Particularly at the working class low end of it, because that was where, we complain about it, but, if you're really relying on that, right, it's like the price of McDonald's or some sort of McDonald's index that people follow, right, because it's indicative of how much that's pinching your pocketbook. And so that's, the answer to that.
Really complex.
It's super complex.
Why I'm happy that we've got guys in the government that understand these markets. It's going to be a really difficult challenge. Listen, there are other parts of the government, I was saying, Trump ran on, I'm going to reform the Department of Education or get away or do away with it. And a lot of Republicans want school choice. There's a growing group of Democrats that want school choice. How do we have a better system to educate our kids? Do you let the market normally wins? Let the market help, right? So Jeff Yost, the guy who runs Susquehanna, has pumped a lot of philanthropic money into school choice. Robin Hood, we're on the board. Big advocate of charter schools. There's always a fight back from the Democrats, from the teachers' unions, saying, no, we need these unions. And so we have a real shot that Trump is going to do something to shake up school choice. Now, there's risks to it, of course, always. What confuses me is instead of picking someone who really has charter school experience or who really has educational experience, he picked Linda McMahon from the WWE.
Yeah, I don't understand that one.
He's got a long-term relationship with the McMahons. He's a loyalist. Trump is loyal before anything else.
Yeah, I'm curious if when he picked her, 'cause I haven't followed that one this closely, but like what actually do you think if what's the math or what on earth could he be thinking? I'm just wondering.
She had run, I think, the Small Business Administration, the first Trump administration, so he knows her. She ran for governor at one point. And I think he just trusts her and likes her. She was on the Connecticut, board of something in education at one point, so she served at least at a titular position. And maybe she knows a lot more than I would guess. But having just watched that WD documentary, and I recommend it for everybody, she gets pile drived, she gets body slammed, she literally gets slapped, and so it's not your normal Secretary of Education.
What do you think about RFK and the FDA?
Our food system sucks. We've heard me talk about it for a fucking year. He's going to try to take on the food system, right? We are one of 2 countries that allow medical advertisement. New Zealand and America are the only countries on the frickin' planet that have Ozempic ads. Ozempic. Why do we sit through the side effects are diarrhea? It's always diarrhea. Every fucking pill is diarrhea.
What are some other side effects?
Nausea.
Nausea is a side effect for everything.
Eyeball bleeding.
It's shocking what a percentage of TV ad revenue comes from the drug companies.
Yeah.
So you have this unholy alliance in this drug company, unhealthy food company, that he's like, this is crazy. Our food sucks.
I just want to ask, when you're like the drug companies are scared, what specifically, right? Because we still need medications, and what specifically about him do you think is problematic? If you're Merck, if you're J&J or, some biotech company,
Well, even the fact that he's going to try to go after advertising, perversely, it could be good for them because the current winners lock in their position,
Yeah.
right? And they have to spend a lot less because right now they spend a fortune on advertising.
right.
So, we can't advertise. It goes right to your bottom line. And it's hard for new companies or new drugs to get in. But I think that's just that change itself.
Right. If you were looking at like food companies, do you think, big producers of corn, soy, beef, do you think they're winners, they're losers? It's like more regulation, less regulation?
I
'Cause
think,
I
high
can't tell.
high fructose corn syrup, he's already put a target on.
Yeah,
Now,
as he should.
is that the Von Hool family who's getting these sugar subsidies down in Florida? Like, these guys are good politically. They know how to keep their subsidies. We subsidize big sugar, and it's in all our food. Everyone knows we'd be better off if we had less sugar. Preservatives, all this stuff.
No, it's probably I would say we have the worst industrial food supply system in the world, right? Europe's is much better, Asia's is better, Africa's is just less developed, but better in a sense that at least I can't speak specifically.
We're
to it, but,
56% processed food. France is 14 and Italy's 12.
Yeah, like ultra processed
difference.
food. Yeah,
That's actually crazy.
it is.
That's called the Novi Index for all you guys want to know.
Novo?
Novi, a cousin of mine.
Everything that you guys are saying makes a ton of sense, very confusing. But at the same token, it really just sounds like ultimately it's going to be really bad for middle class and poor people. Because like so many, it just, to me, it just sounds like jobs are gone, 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 jobs are gone.
No, I don't think that's what's happening though.
Like,
maybe I don't think that's what we're
AI
saying.
is going to take a ton of jobs.
That's a different
right?
thing.
And that's a ton of jobs from middle class, accountants, this, that, coders, that.
Okay, so you're talking about AI now.
No, I'm talking about all across the board, right? Because like tariffs, right?
Yeah, I don't think you
put on
should look at
tariffs.
tariffs like they're taking jobs, though, because that's not exact. In fact, somebody that's supporting tariffs would say they're creating jobs. Like, if you're Donald
but if
Trump
you're
making that
creating
argument,
jobs, right, and
you're saying
you're paying me
creating jobs.
$1, let's say you're paying me $1, right? But now something because of a tariff is now $3.
Yeah, so it's what Mike was talking about before, though, where it's like you can't create the economy equally for everybody. And what tariffs are doing is trying to protect manufacturing, right? Largely, right? And so that's a place where, look, we need to put resources, we need to protect manufacturing, right? Or those jobs, right? That stability helps the country ultimately. So I don't think tariffs are an argument to eliminate jobs. I think they would make the opposite argument and they would say, no, we're protecting American jobs. We're creating American jobs. It is true that a part of that or a counterpart of that, I guess, would be that consumer prices for those items, would go up for those specific items. But there's, maybe you don't buy those items or maybe there's a U.S. food source or car company or something that substitutes. So you're supporting Tesla instead of BYD.
Because remember, we had the Jolie guy in here who created the shower head, and he was like, I would love to make my product in America, but it's just so ridiculously expensive. Like, I wouldn't be able to sell it to anyone.
Yeah.
Right? So, like...
Yeah, I think when people get down to it and start looking, it's a lot harder to redo the supply chain. It will happen over time. I mean, we're trying. Really, the government gave the CHIPS Act, Intel all this money to build a chip plant, and no one's going to compete with TSMC for a while.
Yep.
And so it'll be really interesting to watch, and some of it will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And at that one point, Mexico was a great bet because everyone would just build in Mexico instead of China. But now, Mexico is, got new government. People don't like the way it's going. Trump is pushing them pretty hard. It was interesting, right? He was like, tariffs for your drug dealing and fentanyl. And the president of Mexico, is a woman, said, wait a minute, hold on. 75% of the guns that we confiscate in Mexico are made in America. We don't make those goddamn guns. You guys ship them here. And oh, by the way, our people aren't doing the drugs. It's your demand that's bringing the drugs in there. And so, like, why don't you help us instead of screaming at us? It's pretty
I
complicated.
think
both
that's
are-
kind of
both-
like bullshit.
No, those
though.
are both facts.
No,
Well-
I'm not saying it's not facts. I'm saying it's bullshit on her end because it's like, okay, we are demanding the drugs, but we're addicted to the drugs that's being smuggled in from Mexico, and the guns are being smuggled out by the cartel.
But what's our culpability versus their culpability? We're both culpable.
No, but that's something completely different.
You could say we're both culpable.
We're completely both
We're
culpable.
both culpable. Yeah, I'm saying like I don't think. I'm saying like you could say
It would have been like them saying, we're going to put tariffs on you if you don't stop the illegal gun trade into Mexico. Right?
I think so.
What's the difference between what Trump just said with that statement?
Yeah, no, I'm processing what you're saying. You're saying like
He said, if you don't stop the drug trade into America, we're going to put tariffs on you. She could say, if you don't stop the illegal gun trade into Mexico, we're going to put tariffs on you.
it's also like hard to look at United States as one. I mean, we are one entity. On the other hand, there's lots of constituencies within the country that are very anti-gun, very, right? And so it's true that we produce a ton of guns. A ton of them make their way into Mexico, right? There's a lot of narco businesses in Mexico with a ton of money, and that system's corrupted by it, right? So it's such a complicated, and she
Here's the
doesn't really
crazy
have
thing.
control over it entirely either.
There should be a joint task force between the U.S. and Mexico to go smash the narcos.
Yeah.
I was just about to say that. Here's the crazy thing, right? As badass as the narcos is and so on and so forth, if we really went to war with the narcos, right? Not like we're just investigating you deeper and da-da-da. No, we put some seals and say, hey,
It's hard.
go down there.
Another group pops
tried
up
it.
because it's
Yeah.
the
No, but
demand. It's the
listen.
demand for drugs.
I'm not saying another group doesn't pop up, but if we sent some SEALs, Delta forces, and the army there, and she cleared it and say, hey, take these guys to war, we can't stop them. We'll clean them up in
it's
2
not right
minutes.
away, but I will say it makes
a
a
year
difference.
later, there's another group that's doing the same thing.
Yeah, because we effectively did that in Colombia, right? I mean, at some point in time when Escobar was there, we just got so bothered by it. We went down there, we had all the leverage on the Colombian government at that point in time. We went in, we took him out. I don't know, did it solve the problem? It kind of moved the problem somewhere else, I would say, right?
We
At
have
the
an
end of the day.
insatiable demand in this country for cocaine and heroin. We just do. And until that changes, it's going to come from somewhere.
But coming back from the Middle East, there's very little, if any, drug trade there, right?
No, there's plenty of drugs in the Mideast.
I'm,
You just got to know where to look.
Yeah, I know, but it's not on every single corner, right? So at some point you could
Yes, but that's them policing themselves. We tried it before. We threw a bunch of black men in jail for marijuana and cocaine and crack cocaine. Crack cocaine, you had a worse penalty from powder cocaine, right? Half of the reason we had this giant prison population was drug use.
So what do we do?
One idea is you legalize
I mean,
it. One idea is you decriminalize it all, have it all sold through pharmacies.
I
don't
think-
love it, but it's a better idea than having drug wars and.
I would look at it differently, which is for something like Mexico, that I think the key is to get the real economy, not the narco economy, strong enough that the narco economy can't exert the pull over the politics that it does today. The reason it can right now is because there's so much concentrated money in that. And so where I think Mexico's gone backwards under AMLO or under Claudia Sheinbaum or whatever the new
Sheinbaum, right?
Sheinbaum, the new president is, they're not really creating innovation, entrepreneurship, right? They're just kind of papering money around kind of what we did with our COVID stimulus, right? They're just doing a giant stimulus in Mexico. They're not really creating technology, industries, entrepreneurship, and things like that. And so that's the key to growing Mexico out of that, is how to support. I mean, onshoring would have been a big step in that, right? But that's kind of gotten botched because of the politics, between the leftists of Mexico and the rightists of United States, and they can't work together. And so it's complicated, but that's the key. I mean, Mexico, like 120 million people on our border, reasonably educated, hardworking. Like, I mean, they are set up for success, but they're just not doing it.
Okay, talking about our border real quick.
So yeah, because we're gonna run out of time, and I got my Christmas card. You guys will all see the Christmas card. It's a 34-year tradition. The thing that scared most of the people that didn't vote for Trump, I think the scariest thing that he's talked about is using the Insurrection Act, which has not been really used since Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War, where you take the military, which is by charter for foreign wars, and bring them on shore and say, hey, you're now going to protect our border and round up illegals, up to 20 million, as he said, illegals, and send them home. And, listen, guys like Rand Paul, who's a Republican senator, libertarian, it's like, no. He's like, absolutely not. We're not going to have 18-year-old kids walking down through Bed-Stuy or through Flatbush with machine guns saying, hey, let me see, Jamaica, give me your passport.
Why did Abraham Lincoln use it?
We were in the Civil War.
And
there was a war between the North and the South.
Did it work?
What?
Did it work? How did it work out?
Well, I mean, we killed 500,000 people.
But also,
That's crazy, actually.
But I mean, there was the bloodiest war of all time.
What are we talking about?
Wait,
right now?
I thought you were talking about deportation.
No. It's illegal for a president to use the military on domestic soil unless he invokes the Insurrection Act, right? And so,
what about when there was the National Guard during civil rights?
They could call the National Guard. The governors can call the National Guard out for domestic disturbances. The president can't call the military out for domestic disturbances. Very big difference. And a matter of fact, one of the reasons all these generals opposed Trump, right? General Mattis, General Kelly, all these generals, multiple times he called it his special power. Hey, what's my magic power? And he wanted to use the Insurrection Act for riots, for lots of things.
Yeah.
And they're like, you're not allowed to. You'll go to jail. And his lawyer said, you'll go to jail. He's a lot more emboldened this time. He's like, they try to put me in jail. They can't put me in jail. And he knows, because he's smart, the American people will support, hey, if you start with saying, we're going to just put the military on the border because there's an invasion happening. It sounds like it's not domestic.
Are you talking about...
I'm talking about the only way Trump is allowed to use the military to round up the 20 million illegals that he's talking about is invoking the Insurrection Act, which has not been done in American history.
I think the illegals rounding up this whole thing is going to be like Mexico's paying for the wall, right? In other words, this is stuff he talked about, yada, 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 during the election. I don't see it happening, to be honest with you. Just like the wall never got built, right? Good idea, bad idea. Mexico's going to pay for it. It never happened, right? I mean, they built yay much of it, and I think it's going to be the same thing.
But didn't that not happen because the administration switched?
No. Well, first he couldn't.
Mexico said, screw you, we're not paying for the wall.
Yeah, well, that, then it's just, I think it's campaign politics is making a point, right? We need to stop illegal immigration. Okay, he's in office. He's not going to go running
What
through
you're
cities.
hoping is he uses ICE, that they go after the gang members, they make a show of it. And because the border's already slowed down.
Yeah.
It slowed down in the last 5 months of the Biden administration.
Yeah.
When Biden finally decided, I should pay more attention to the border. And so I'm praying you're right. Again, what I've said to all my friends, I said, listen, you got a new president. He's doing some things. You got to support the good stuff, and shit that you really don't like, you got to fight back against. And this is the one thing that I think a lot of non-Trump supporters are really nervous about. And we'll see. I'm hoping Dave's right. Ounce of gold, Mel?
Huh?
Mel, your ounce of gold?
Ounce of gold.
I'm worried. If Scott Besson is really successful, we might have to start not giving the ounce of gold and giving something else.
What is gold
Gold's
now?
going to devalue?
Gold will go down in price if we take our budget deficit from 7% to 2%.
I think right now we have a lot of, I'm going to call it recency bias or comfort. I don't know what bias is going on, but the entire dialogue is shifted from the world is blowing up with with deficit spending, and that's what I still see, right? And no matter what election promises or Elon or Vivek or whatever, right? Okay, maybe they take a whack at it. Maybe it's this much happens, but this trend of giant government budget deficits and carrying these huge debts, it's just too easy. Nobody's going to want to raise taxes. Nobody's going to really want to cut spending at the end of the day, because it's nice to talk about efficiency, but that usually means cutting jobs. And when you start cutting jobs, people start getting upset and, et cetera.
And so, Trump doesn't like people not like him.
And so I think this conversation we're having right now, it's really great in this honeymoon. He hasn't even taken office yet to be like, all this stuff's going to happen. I think we're going to be sitting here in 3 months or 6 months.
Again, from a market's perspective, I thought you're going to have to give them the benefit of the doubt and for a little while. So we might have put the top in for gold for a little while. We might not have.
Yeah.
And then we see what they do. Again, convincing Donald Trump to do what he doesn't want to do is not easy, right? You're fired. and so we'll see.
But I just think that and I think you agree, the overall trend of just like giant ballooning government debts, the world awash in credit, both government and private, isn't really going anywhere. And so the case for gold, and certainly the case for Bitcoin, is that over time, the dollar, the yen, whatever you want to say, is devaluing relative to commodities, gold, Bitcoin, hard assets.
All right.
I still believe that story. So,
peace.
All right. Business Untitled, over and out. Like, subscribe, follow, comment. And we'll
Tell
see
Mike
you soon.
happy birthday. We forgot about that.
Mike's birthday was a little while ago.
Birthday was
a few days
yesterday. Happy 67th birthday to Mike Novo. Nah, he's not really 67. I'll let you guess.